Robert Gibbs, I have grown increasingly concerned about what Michael Steele's talking about here, the permeation of the falsehoods. And I've looked at some of the doctored videos he sent out this week. It wasn't clear to me that, I mean, if Twitter's trying to get this stuff down, they're not trying very hard. How does Joe Biden combat someone with a cult-like hold over his base who believe the lies?
Well, look, I think videos like you just showed loosen up some of that base, at least some of those people that voted in 2016 for Donald Trump that have had doubts about his leadership over the past 4 years, have had doubts about his rhetoric, are watching somebody that worked closely with him in the White House on this response and are listening to her words. I think that is singularly important in how to divorce that. I think Joe Biden has to go out there and continue to look and sound like a president every day. I don't think you can get down in the gutter with Donald Trump. I think that's exactly where he wants people to come with him. I think that's where he wants to drag people down. I think he's got to continue to stay above it. I think he's got to continue to act as if he were the leader of the country, even though he's not, to project that presidential nature, to talk about what we have to do, because I have a sneaking suspicion that after November and by the middle of January of next year, he's going to be implementing this response. So it's best to start acting like you're implementing part of that response right now by educating people on exactly what they need to be doing.
I agree with all that, and I pray to God we get to that. If we were in the studio, I would grab you in the hall and ask you to tell me the truth. I mean, here's my concern. Republicans, and I say this as someone who used to work for them, they go to Election Day, especially these last 50 days, like Jason Bourne. I mean, they go like killers. What are the Democrats bringing to fight this asymmetrical president whose plan is to cheat, whose attorney general's plan is to help him, and whose supporters are, if you take an American president line to mix with the born supremacy, they've been asked to crawl through the sand and eat the sand.
Well, look, it may be that's just not what's in Democrats' DNA exactly, quite the description of the Bourne identity as you just walked us through. But look, I have no doubt that they're going to play hardball in terms of turning this response and its feckless nature, as Michael Steele just said, and use that against Donald Trump, to walk people through the fact that this simply didn't have to be this way. I mean, that's exactly what this ad says, is it didn't have to be like this. And I think every day reminding people, I think we have to be careful not to go crazy and go over the top, because you'll lose people, but walk people through the fact that every single day, people in this administration simply didn't take this response seriously. And the result, it just didn't have to be like this. It didn't have to be that our kids are still learning from home. It didn't have to be that we aren't seeing our parents and our grandparents. It didn't have to be like this. We didn't have to have this rush through nursing homes and kill hundreds and thousands of people. We could have done something differently. Think about it. Think of a Republican governor, a Mike DeWine or a Larry Hogan. Think if this president had acted like they did. If he had taken it seriously from day one, the disease would be in a fundamentally different place in this country. We would be in a fundamentally different place. We'd have fewer deaths and we'd have more activity. Our economy would be stronger because more of it would be open. And quite frankly, politically, Donald Trump would be as strong as anybody could imagine. He'd be coasting to re-election. And I think history will show on all three of those things that Donald Trump had the decision to make. He could have done this differently, and he didn't. And I think Democrats just have to keep putting that in front of people every single day.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.